members are present. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Kelly, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, indivisible, with liberty. The next item is comments from the audience. We'll have Laura check. There are no requests for that. But as a point of privilege, I'm going to call on Superintendent Schultz to make a comment about the fire alarm this morning and also to introduce a new member of our staff.
Thank you, Deb. Good evening. Yes, to begin with, I would like to introduce the newest member of our administrative team, the facility supervisor, Brian Corlett. Brian joins us. He's been an administrator for many years. He's done all of the roles, I believe. And so he began today, and he met me at the high school when the fire alarms were going off, which was a good sign that he's going to be responsive. So we will officially welcome him on our website with a few more of his accolades and that sort of thing. But for tonight, we just want to thank him for joining the team and having him here.
And you want to share a little bit about what happened with the fire?
Yes. Well, it really, the thing with when you have smoke and you have facilities, it's just it's a perfect storm of things. And then when you add in a communication system that was altered a bit, we're not sure if it was one of the national things that was causing some things with I'm going to say that, but it was also difficult to be as transparent quickly with parents as to what was going on. But we had just light ballasts in one of our side rooms on the east side of the facility that just malfunctioned, and so then it brought smoke into the hallways. And so we are doing some electrical work, just assessment, further evaluation tonight at 7:30, and so just for some precautionary, but also just to get another set of eyes on the wiring that is, on the unexpected piece, just to make sure we didn't miss anything today. But as always, the Brookings Fire Department, they come and they're just so wonderful to work with and communicate with us, and so the timing was good, but it could have been worse in the sense that kids could have been in the district, in the school building. But we were able to start around 8:20 once we knew where it was isolated to, and so.
Well, thank you for that update. Okay, the next item on the agenda, this is a workshop meeting, and so we have a very limited agenda, but we do need to have a motion to approve the agenda as proposed.
I move approval of agenda as proposed.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as proposed. Any discussion?
Yeah, I just had a discussion to make a request to add a special meeting, a discussion meeting to our meeting agenda to discuss our collaboration with the city and some of our land assets some of us have been working through.
I concur.
Okay, we'll add that to the agenda, and we will
So my
vote on
motion,
that at a later date.
as it stands, is with this addition.
Okay? Been moved and seconded to add that request. Okay, are we ready for the vote? Okay, let's have the vote. Okay, the agenda is approved as modified. Okay, next is the reading of the district vision statement, and Terry, would you read that, please?
Vision statement is empowering all learners to embrace and be inspired to realize their potential.
Thank you. Okay, that brings us to any conflict of interest declarations. Did we have any presented, Dr. Schultz? No, none tonight. Okay. Then next is our presentation. And for those that may be on live streaming, we're working on some renovations at the high school, specifically in the science department. And so tonight, we are going to have a presentation from Co-op Architecture regarding these renovations and what they're going to look like, and of course, the cost to us. So we'll turn it over to these gentlemen that are here from Co-op Architecture for their presentation. And if you two would just introduce yourselves too and tell a little bit about yourself. So,
Perfect. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, as we sort of mentioned, just a quick agenda before we get into our introductions. We'll introduce ourselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about the process that has sort of gotten us here over the last year or so, and then talk about the plan concept, sort of where they sit, kind of everything with that, what that budget looks like, and what that schedule looks like going forward from that. But to jump back, for those of you who I have not had the chance to meet yet, my name is Jason Can. I'm an architect with Co-op Architecture in Sioux Falls.
Trevor Van Conen. I've been doing this about 13 years, so I'll be the day-to-day project manager. Jason.
And just a reminder, get the microphone kind of close because it doesn't project very much unless it's close.
Sounds good. So Trevor and I have been the team that have been working on this since we kind of started the facilities assessment component a year ago. So you'll kind of see both of our faces sort of going forward and through any construction if anything kind of moves forward from that standpoint. But we have, in this particular process, we kind of started with the facilities assessment. You'll kind of see up here, Co-op Architecture. This is kind of a lot of the stuff we do, facilities assessments, planning, design, construction administration. That is kind of essentially the plan that is sort of laid out for the scope of this project. And we'll get into that here in just a little bit, how that sort of started with the facilities assessment and everything there. Trevor and I, we are both in our Sioux Falls office. You can see here, Co-op, we kind of cover the whole state. We originally started in Sioux Falls and Aberdeen and added an office out in Rapid about 10 years ago. But we work very, very extensively with the K-12 school districts across the state of South Dakota. And Trevor and I in particular have spent a lot of time on the eastern side of the state here, kind of up the I-29 corridor, working with a lot of districts over here. So we were very excited to work with the Brookings School District and all of you, kind of get going on the concept and where we're at there. So with that initial concept, if for those who maybe weren't aware, everyone up here I think has seen all this, but essentially this started as an assessment of the science facilities about a year ago. We spent the early part of the fall session kind of doing some meetings with staff, with some of the administration, doing walkthroughs of the rooms, kind of assessing the mechanical, electrical, architectural, all those sort of systems, and kind of put together a report from that you would have now seen about a year ago. What came of that was obviously a lot of work needed to be done in these science rooms. They were original to the building from the 60s, so there's a lot of scope that really needed to be done. We did present 3 options with that at that point, this being option A here, and they essentially were kind of tiered to sort of the level of renovation and scope that might be undertaken with this type of project. This option A here was to essentially try to minimize the disruption, the number of walls we were taking down, maybe minimize the amount of plumbing that was getting redone, all those sort of things, try to use as much in place as we can and just kind of bring a lot of those, finishes and systems and things like that up to snuff to today's standards and all. That was option A. That didn't really address some of the space concerns, size concerns, the sort of excess storage rooms, those types of things that kind of existed in this area. So options B and C kind of proposed different versions of sort of solving some of those issues. Option B that you see up here right now essentially looked at what that would be if you went to a model that shared labs between classes. So essentially you would have a lecture room and then you would have a shared lab space that multiple classrooms would use and schedule out and use throughout the day or throughout the week. We did talk through that sort of with staff and administration in various different meetings, and I think while it's an approach, it's one that would take a fairly decent, sort of change in how things are sort of operated and approached sort of within the department. So we proposed another version that would maybe be less of a change and to be more of a hybrid option that would still have classrooms that have lecture space within the room and lab within that same space. That was accommodated fairly well on the two classrooms that you'll see on the left side of the plan because of the size of those. The other classrooms are a little bit smaller, so in this particular version, we tried to take some of that excess storage space and make those classrooms a little bit bigger to be able to accommodate that in at least 4 of the classrooms to create a better lab space within those. There were still 3 classrooms that were a little bit smaller in this option, but it was kind of a hybrid between those. So those, when you reviewed all of those last year, those all kind of had their options and their budgets and everything with that. And when this sort of came back around, we reviewed these with staff and and started those conversations on what maybe the right versions are. So we've gone through a few different versions. This option C was, out of the 3, was the one that had most positive comments back and was the direction that it seemed like everyone wanted to go. So this was sort of the direction that we focused on, and it did sort of modify a few different ways, which we'll talk about in the current option here. Now, so to preface this, we have met. So we have our building committee that we've met with a couple times. I've met with a couple of you board members too to kind of give an update on that during this process, and we have met with staff to have some of these discussions as well. When we get to the schedule portion, we'll talk about that again because the intent would be that we have another round of those review meetings and commentary from the building committee and from staff before this stuff kind of gets finalized. But that's sort of where we are right now. So the first plan we have here is the demolition floor plan, which essentially is the plan that outlines all the stuff we're taking out. And this is basically a good review of sort of what is there in a lot of these rooms. Essentially, the idea is that we would basically take out all the casework, all the cabinetry, all of the finishes, all of the plumbing, all those sort of things, and essentially sort of start fresh. You can see the dashed lines that are in there are walls that we would demo with the plan. So there's a good number of walls that would be coming down with the proposed concept to kind of create spaces that frame the new options better.
Jason, can you include that discussion on the bathrooms? I don't know if everyone, maybe, just to make sure they understand how the bathrooms kind of got pulled into this too.
Yeah. So if you, and I'll jump back to these here. So if you look at these options when we first did this, the restrooms were in the same spot as they were. The original intent was to potentially leave those in the same spot. As we had some of these meetings and met with staff, kind of went through some of these and went through the assessment, it was fairly apparent that one, a lot of work needed to be done with those restrooms at some point, whether that is part of this project or not. That was scope that needed to be taken care of at some point. And once we sort of established the amount of work in some of these areas around these spaces, we'll be tying into pretty much all of the plumbing components, everything underground there, tying into these areas. It makes sense to do that scope right now.
It was really hard for me not to have them dig into those bathrooms. Like other areas of the building, they just, we've been adding some TLC touch-ups this year. However, I think that's just in those personal spaces, students deserve just a bit more. And so that is why when we're in all of that and the plumbing and the demolition piece was going to happen, it just really, I feel like we don't want to miss the chance to do something with those bathrooms.
And as we started talking about that, we looked, the initial versions, try to keep those in the same place, to just, try to minimize that impact as much as possible. As we talked more about the classroom function and the sizes that we wanted for those and the flexibility that we wanted with the sort of hybrid classrooms, we tried to figure out how to make as many of those classrooms as possible. And with that meant moving one of those restrooms down to the bottom side. So you'll see here, switching to the actual floor plan, instead of having a men's room and women's room on the opposite hallways, the intent with this plan would actually be to move those all to one side, and have an entrance to both of those, be able to do those back to back with the chase between them, kind of get a little bit more efficient with our plumbing and get a little bit more efficient with our space use. So, so it creates more classroom space and allows us to do some more of those bigger classrooms to address that sort of hybrid aspect. From a plumbing count, this essentially matches what is there right now. So we're not, really adding any students or anything like that from a code perspective with the remodel. It's basically just renovation of space that already exists. So that count can stay the same. So essentially we're duplicating what that count is and just kind of making it a little bit more concise on the side and putting them.
I do have a question. The physical science classroom, the prep area for them would be across the hall then?
Correct. So that was one of the conversations, honestly, one of the big conversations we've had this fall with staff as we've gone through this was, we did have a version, if you look at this plan right here, that storage room, 134, that's a room that exists there right now. In the early versions of this, we kept that room there. So that would, I don't know if you can see my mouse. Yeah, I think you can. So that would exist in this area here. When we met about it, the discussion led to the direction of providing that space within the classroom as opposed to a prep room. So when that was there, this classroom here, this physical science classroom, was smaller than the other 5 classrooms kind of in that central core, limiting a little bit of what they could do as far as lecture space and lab space. By moving it to the one across the hall and sharing it between those 3, that allows that space to get up to about 1,200 square feet and be pretty similar to all other 5. So essentially creating 6 bigger classrooms there that should be able to accommodate both lecture space and lab space.
Oh, anatomy is sharing that one with the physical science as well.
Correct. And that discussion, a lot of it was that how storage is used. They can do a lot of that storage within their classrooms, and there are certain things that they can use that prep room for and share. And I think there's still a little bit of the discussion to be as to sort of what the organization of those classrooms are a little bit too. Maybe who uses that prep room the most efficiently as an adjacent space, and who uses it most efficiently as a space you have to cross the hall too. So I think in our next round of meetings, that'll probably get hashed out a little bit more with staff as well, to just make sure we have that correct.
Some other teachers then are going to get moved to different classrooms? Is that, I mean, do these rooms, so like these, right, I mean, so other subject matters, they'll have to move to smaller rooms?
There,
I mean, are these rooms going to take
yeah.
extra space from other teachers, other subjects?
Another department.
Yes, department subjects.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's
The
what
demolition, it looks like they are, because there's
Will
those,
they be moved to smaller rooms?
So, yeah, this room right here, I believe has a
there's one less
English
classroom.
in it right now. So yes, this takes up 2 classrooms here. This is, I believe, the empty flex room right now. As far as where that classroom goes, from a programming standpoint, I'm not totally sure, yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
We can hear you.
On that one. They want you on the screen.
So at this moment, 133 at the top and 135 are our English classrooms, and 137 is kind of our bonus room, if you will. So 35 and 37 become the one science room, so we are consuming 2 for 1. And then the plan would be for the English classroom, 135, to then go where our current physical science classroom is, which is adjacent to the library. So if demolition floor plan is your hallway, there's another room that was physical science that would now become English, is where that would come from. So, we would be, like I said, we're taking 2 to create 1 bigger science, but we do have room for everything that we're currently teaching at this point. Okay. Sort of moving on then, essentially, as we sort of talk about the prep rooms, basically this plan is set up so these 4 rooms here, the chemistry and the biology rooms, would all have direct access and share this prep room in the center here. So we did have some meetings, or discussed this kind of in the meeting about what would go in that prep room as well with staff. And, essentially there's a shower eye wash station, likely a dishwasher, a sink, obviously some storage space. There's a little work area in there for any of them to work in there. And then we have our chemical storage and our flammable storage and all that sort of stuff kind of on the back wall in here. But the intent is that all is housed in here, and all 4 of those rooms would have direct access to this to be able to share, and work in there if they need to. Obviously, it's a much smaller room than what it was previously. And if you look at all of that sort of tan colored space in there, there's a very, very large amount of storage space in the existing plan. So it is consolidating a lot of that. But in our discussions, that was the direction that it seemed like staff wanted to go, that they could facilitate a lot of that storage in their room with casework in there, and then use a much smaller space as far as that prep room space, and then utilize that better for students within the classrooms.
And then the physical science and the anatomy, they wouldn't use as many chemicals, but will there still be an eye wash station in that prep room as well?
Yeah, so our intent is to have eye wash stations in each room.
In both prep rooms?
Yep,
Okay.
and then the prep rooms would have the eye wash and shower, yep.
And shower, okay, good.
The one other component that we have here is this little sort of collaborative area down in this corner as well. And that has sort of come about from discussions as to where we can potentially house or provide a space, a little bit of different learning space or space for students to, if they go out of the classroom for any learning events, where they can sit down and focus. Currently, there are oftentimes where students or student groups will go into the hallway and they'll work in the hallway. This would give them a space to do that, or give a little bit of a space for any other sort of groups or clubs or anything like that to be able to kind of sit down, do a little student group learning, have a marker board and things like that to kind of do anything in that area. And it lines up well with the library and media center right there in that corner too, is a little bit more of a collaborative space, offer, a little bit more of that kind of 21st century learning sort of environment and spaces for some of those collaborative kind of pieces.
One of the pieces that, as far as when when we look at it from just a science perspective, it's not going to be a high priority area, but trying to make this building more, we need to find more options for students to have individualized learning areas, independent study areas, collaboration areas, and develop that with the technology, the flexible seating that makes kids want to stay in the building when they have work to do and projects to do, that sort of thing. And we just have an area there. Now, maybe that's something that we decide we don't want. But those are things, as we look big picture in the building, we have to think about, because, newer buildings have many more opportunities for kids to find those spaces that they can go, they can just, kind of do their own thing, or a teacher brings small groups in, that sort of thing. So that is not just a science component there. I'd really like to see us keep some of those around. When you see buildings now that are being built, there's lots of those spaces. We just need to keep trying to find opportunities to create them when we can. But obviously not something that has to stay.
Yeah, and, you know, it's a really nice area to be able to do a little bit of, you know, science on display type of stuff too, if that's an option. Down the road, just kind of show some of the things that are going on there, maybe have a board or something that just kind of brings some of that to the forefront and allows other students to sort of see that and engage with that too, without necessarily being in those classrooms and doing that within the class.
I could see your CTSOs using that, your career and technical student organizations, as the HOSHA student organization, using that a lot for like the presentations that they do, getting ready for their conferences and stuff. So I really like the idea of having it there.
I just wondered, I have questions about your page 14, your probable cost stuff, but before that, as kind of people were asking, besides the bathroom and that collab space, were there other big picture items that came up from your kind of investigation of the high school overall, meeting with the teachers, facilities group that met, just any other, I know we have eventually we'll have more work at the high school to be done, and so I just wondered if anything besides the bathroom and the collab space
Well,
came up.
yeah.
Ceiling, last time we ended up doing a ceiling because of something, or
Right,
plumbing
absolutely.
and all those
Well,
things, so.
I think that's the thing, and last spring, when this got moved into the next priority stage, we talked a lot about, this is one area is all. So, you know, we couldn't bring them in and then say, oh, by the way, go talk to all the other teachers.
Right.
So we didn't, and when this got put into that priority of science area renovation, then we stuck with science area renovation, although we've done work throughout the building and just in those anecdotal meetings of, you know, prioritizing the areas that do need to be on our radar. Unfortunately, many of them are foundational pieces, much like the HVAC and the roofs and that sort of thing. So although, yes, nothing official, just because once this was approved at that spring meeting to move forward with, we just really had to, and that, we pulled the bathrooms in, but we just focused on this piece.
I more meant kind of anecdotally, anything that came up that you guys noticed, like, oh, you know, any,
Yeah,
those
there's a
scary,
few of those.
you know, okay. So bathrooms and the collapse space is kind of the
That
addition or the extra benefits we're getting out of this investment in science. Okay,
I mean, that's really that piece, and that is the problem with the piece, you know, with doing small projects, but, well, again, as we, you know, as it was discussed in the spring,
yep.
Well, that's why I like the idea of this collab space, because as you're talking future planning, this is just this. But coming from a teaching's perspective, on a much smaller scale, I have that in my classroom, and having lots of conversations with teachers and being in and out of the high school, that is, I think, a much needed space, and then that helps us set a tone for future projects that we have. But I just know from having conversations with high school teachers and having my own classroom, that collab space, you know, if you're not in there, you might not understand how useful it can be, but that helps us kind of set a tone for any later projects we might have and say, what worked about this space, where else can we incorporate it?
And then this is just a curiosity question, because I trust all the conversations that the teachers had in getting to the plan that they're at today. I just wondered how many schools you do that. Page 8, was that your plan B? With the shared lab?
I know, I like.
Because
the-
I just was interested if school districts are operating like that, and if you've done that project like that.
I would say in South Dakota, it is a far less utilized direction in K-12. I think as we get into higher ed projects,
Yeah.
it's far more of a setup in those types of projects we've done. But in K-12, I would say most still lean towards the hybrid approach that utilizes lecture space and lab space within existing room. I would say the biggest reason to do it would have been if we weren't going to demo out, you know, like if we weren't moving the restrooms in demoing out some of those walls that we have demoed out, which allowed us to create bigger rooms throughout that kind of core. This helped address rooms that were too small to do that lecture space and have the lab space set up in it at the same time. But because we were able to move the restroom, kind of reshape and take advantage of all of that sort of storage space that's in the middle, because there is a good amount of square footage, from a floor plan standpoint, there was a good amount of square footage in this area to have big classrooms. It just, how it was sort of laid out with the bathrooms and stuff like that made it a little bit more difficult. But by shifting some of that stuff around, it made it a lot more feasible to do the hybrid one with the bigger classrooms. A couple quick comments on that. I mean, on maybe some of the other facility stuff. Obviously, this area in particular probably had more things to deal with just because of all the plumbing and things like that. That was, 60 plus years old, and things like that weren't working, and stuff like that was limiting what the staff could do and what they can do from a teaching standpoint. Some of those factors aren't quite as big of a factor throughout because you're not going to have as much water and some of those other things in other spaces, but you will have a lot of, it's like electrical kind of not being up to snuff or being, for really accommodating kind of modern technology or finishes that don't casework that's, kind of falling apart and that type of stuff. And that's just sort of how it goes with that vintage of a building. But I would say there are, with all of the water and plumbing and things like that in this space, it's a bigger issue than probably a lot of them.
Okay. So is that, are we going to talk about fees? Are you going there?
Yeah, we
Okay.
can, yep.
I was just asking if is that why our design, the contingency is at 10%? And so are we anticipating as you go into that plumbing and that electrical that you need to have that high level of a contingency?
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to talk through some of that and then explain the three fee levels.
Page here?
Yes.
So, essentially, we did a takeoff from the building package that we think that the fee would be sort of based on RS means and some of the resources we have for estimating from that standpoint. And we do think, based on the scope that we understand right now and that we can see, that we would expect it to be right around 2. And we feel like that's a safe number.
Okay.
The extra contingency and fee, so FF&E, that's furniture and furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So that would be new tables, any of that type of stuff, if you wanted to carry a number for that. That's a little bit outside of the scope of some of what we've talked about this for now, but that's just to sort of allocate some dollars there to just, honestly, more just make it aware that it's something that needs to be talked about. I do know through the discussions that there are some newer tables and some discussions to happen there.
I just really want to make sure that we don't get in a situation where we don't have that piece budgeted.
Right.
Yep. The
It can
professional
be
service.
paid a year after, or those types of things, cash flow perspective.
The professional
Sorry.
services would be like the design and engineering and construction administration fees and all that type of stuff. And then the DD level contingency, that's, so at 10% right now, probably the biggest outlier in that is the plumbing. And we have had some preliminary discussions with the mechanical engineer on the project about getting some of those lines scoped. And those conversations are happening and apologies.
Nope.
There likely would be a proposal to scope those lines here in the very near future to
Okay.
get a little bit better idea of maybe how much corrosion, how much damage, just what type of stuff we have to work with in the areas that, based on the plan now, they've sort of laid out where they think we need to scope to sort of understand where we might have some issues. So I think that would help hone some of that in. But generally, we would like to carry a contingency just anyway
Correct.
on a renovation project like this, because there are always honestly, any renovation I've ever been on, there's things that have been done in the meantime that aren't on the original plans. You kind of open something up and this has been modified in this way or that way, or this isn't quite like it was shown in the plans. Things didn't get updated like that back in the day. So there are usually some contingency items that we want to carry a number for to just make sure that we have covered in there. But it is a little bit higher now just because of some of those variables.
So the board remembers, with our 2 elementary projects, we just carried a 4% contingency. And so I just wanted to make that aware of that. So I just wanted to talk through that a little bit and then,
Yep.
yeah, go ahead. Well, I don't know. Totally. Yep. Yep. That was still with our Maderi, but yes, some of that. Yep. I don't know if the finance has considered, we also carried our own contingency. Well, we thought we did, carried our own contingency of a 1%.
Yeah.
And so I just would like Stacy at some point to go through how we plan to carry contingencies, because I do feel worried about that with the high school project.
And
If
I'm
we
going
wanna
back
carry
to
our own.
to design a little bit too with ventilation. I forgot to ask a question about that because again, none of these rooms have any windows or anything like that, but you're going to have the risk of a chemical or a fire or something like that that could create some issues when it comes to ventilation. So will there be upgrades to the HVAC system in these rooms as well?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
There'll be upgrades to the HVAC system in all of these
Okay.
rooms. Essentially, they would be utilizing the existing system out in the hallway, but basically from where that comes off of the trunk in the hallway, it would be new ductwork into a new VAV within each one of these rooms. And then there would be just general exhaust in each one of these rooms to pull air out. And there's a fume hood included in the 2 chemicals. This area here as a demonstration hood for any of those sort of things that would be exhausted as well.
Sorry, I'm stuck on contingency. So you return that? You return that then? How do you, because we, again, at our last 2 projects, we just reduced over time, and then they ended up returning that to us, just how that all works.
Correct. Yeah, so that level will get set. So essentially, at this point, like you said, it's a little bit higher because we have some unknowns. And once we go through the bidding process,
Okay.
And we get the bid numbers back and we see where those are at, we'll usually set the contingency off of that.
Okay.
And, usually we, in 3 to 5% is pretty common. A lot of times some renovation projects do bump up anywhere to 7, 8, 10,
Yep.
a little bit more, but 5% is what we carry a lot of times. But
Okay.
that generally will get set at that point, and agreed upon at, when you approve that at whatever that board meeting is. Usually that'll get then carried in the total of the project number in the payoffs. And yes, as we do change orders and process those, we would subtract from that contingency, and whatever is left in that contingency at the end of the project, we would do a change order to credit that back.
Got it.
And take that out. So that doesn't go to the contractor or anybody else. It would just be credited back for whatever doesn't get used.
Got it.
Other questions regarding either the floor plan or the budget at this point? Okay, then we can move on to the timeline.
Yeah, so,
Now, if there'd be a need for another science room for whatever would emerge, what would be the next best option? Trying to read these classrooms,
Well, the one is
yeah. Or the lower right ones, yeah.
yeah, so there wouldn't be.
That's one, yeah, yeah, but, so what would it take to make this accessible from that prep area? If it ever was emerged that we would want that as a science room for whatever reason, down the road,
This room right here, it would be very easy to open it to that prep room. That would be a very simple thing to do. Probably the limiting factor there would be water, if we would want to stub any water into that room or have that prepped for that. Now, you could do that now and have water in this wall here, in preparation for that, if you wanted to run it to any sinks or anything like that in that room down the road. I would say, so that's feasible, and that's doable. That classroom will be a decent bit smaller than the other classrooms, though, so I think you would have to be pretty strategic about what sort of class you put in there, how many students you put in that class, because all of these other rooms are a good chunk over 1,000 square feet. They're 1,100, 1,200 square feet, pretty nice sized classrooms. That particular room, I think, is about 787 square feet. So it would be a smaller classroom where facilitating a full 24 students or, if you get over those in that class with both lecture and lab would be a lot more difficult. So you'd have to be more strategic from that standpoint, but it is doable as an option for an eighth classroom.
What would you add, what would you do today to make it, what word to use, but
Yeah, I think
to make it just more cost effective, I think is how I'd approach it in the future,
Yeah, I think the biggest piece would be we would plan a space here to have a door into that wall. So we would probably just sizer case work and that sort of stuff to be able to just pull those units out and fit a door opening in that space. And then we would probably just run water over to that wall and just have it prepped and ready to go there. But I think you would have to, if you decided to do that project somewhere down the road, you would have to cut up the floor a little bit and get water to wherever sink locations or whatever that is. But I would do that with that project whenever you decide that to happen. Because that might change depending on what that class is. I think if you have that prep, that water ready in that prep room, that gets you there to make it feasible to do.
Work with her on it.
Okay, are we ready to move on to the timeline then, I think? Okay.
Okay, so from a timeline perspective, right now we have just sort of finished, are in what we call design development and just kind of are finishing that phase up. As part of that, we still want to do another set of meetings with both the staff and the building committee. So you'll see those are noted as kind of our next bullets here going forward. If everything looks like we're on the right track and we're all sort of comfortable moving forward in that direction, we will have those conversations with those groups and just make sure we're sort of honed in on what our sink locations are, how we're going to sort of put groups of students around these flexible tables and that sort of stuff, and just make sure that all works well for the staff. And then meet with the building committee group to sort of make sure that everyone's on the same page with that direction and those comments and everything we hear there. From that standpoint, then we will move into construction documents and getting that document set and specifications put together for the drawings. And we would plan to issue those probably early January. So that process usually kind of takes a couple months, so that would be sort of our November, December portion of the calendar here. We get that all finalized and put together and ready to go in early January. Would probably ask either at the December board meeting or that board meeting in January for permission to go out for bids at one of those. I think either one of those would probably be fine, because I think we would, I can't remember when your board meeting is. Have it called out for the 6th to issue for bids. You might ask for it in December, all on the same page. But the intent then would be that we issue those for bid in early January, have our pre-bid meeting and our bid opening late January, and then bid opening in early February, with the intent of getting bid numbers back, reviewing those, and having a discussion about those at your February board meeting. intent from a construction standpoint, and this was sort of discussed, a few times, essentially, this is too big of a scope to happen in a summer. So whether we want to sort of front load some of that work, whether we want to back load that work, I think the direction, as we talked about that a little bit more, was that we would rather backload that work, partially because in the early part of this construction, because it's all encapsulated within the existing building, is a lot of demo work, a lot of dusty work, and a lot of loud work. And if we are going to start, we would probably want to start in March to try to get done by school start for 26. And at that point, it's going to be very disruptive to all of the classrooms around it. And there would be some abatement and things like that happen at that time too, so we would have to deal with a lot of those things. So I think the intent would be that we start that as soon as school gets out. We do our abatement right away and then start with the demolition at that point. Once we have a contractor on board, whoever that low bidder is, we would kind of talk through that schedule with them and see what they think is reasonable, and they'll propose their schedule. Our hope for that schedule right now is that we would be able to push to have that done by the end of the first quarter. I think that will be a little bit of a push, but that's the hope right now, and we'll have to work that out with whoever gets that. That would fall, but the hope is that we can get through one quarter without those classrooms, and then be able to have those for the second. One thing to add to that, essentially by getting this out, I think in January, that bid approved in February, that at least gives us a few to have those conversations, to get the shop drawing process going, get contracts done, and get subcontractors going on getting all of those things ordered, having them ready, and basically being able. I think that should help a good bit from the time frame.
How is the bid market right now? And what do you like that timeline of the bid?
Yeah, I would say right now we are seeing more bids on projects than we have in a long time.
Okay.
This market, and I think there's a lot of folks who are looking for some work. So I do feel like we'll get, obviously generally helps those numbers, and at least helps us know that we're getting something that's competitive and comparable. From what we're seeing on things that we've been bidding late summer and this fall, I think we will get.
Okay. Good.
Do you feel if it was decided to move forward, that early December would be a better bidding time if we've kind of slowed down the timeline a bit here, like just making sure?
I don't think you're going to see a noticeable difference
Okay.
between December and January. I mean, most of the project, I don't think we're going to have bidders, sort of, the biggest concern with it is that as you get too far through winter, is that folks pick up enough work, projects. But from what we've seen, I would expect you to have a lot of bid meetings. Or a
Yeah,
lot of
it would be
bid
the
meetings.
second Monday, which is the 12th of
Well,
January.
okay. So we probably would ask for approval to go out in December, so we can get that out, because essentially we need 30 days to do that, and we want a little bit of time to sort of review those bids and go through that stuff and talk to the low bidder and make sure we don't have any scope gaps and things like that before we come to the February meeting and either, approve or recommend approval or any of that sort of stuff.
Dr. Schultz, or facility committee, so this process is the low bid on every part of that? It's different than our last process, is all I'm just asking.
Sorry, can you say that?
Yeah, just so Clark Drew and Hausman didn't always pick the lowest bidder. They picked because of the process we went through, so I was just trying to understand that, because it was just kind of more trusted, whoever was really the trusted timeline, all those sorts of things, so.
And I can weigh in on that if you
Go
want
ahead.
to. Yeah, so this is, the process right now is a sort of traditional design bid build.
Yep, correct.
Essentially where we have the documents all put together. We we put those out, and those will be bid on by general contractors. So essentially, those general contractors like Houseman or Clark Drew
Yep.
or Mills or, any of those would get all of their numbers from their subcontractors, and they would just give you
Got it.
one number. And then that would be the low bid. In other scenarios like that with a construction manager, they'd be hired on for professional services as a construction manager, and then we would bid all of the
Yep.
subcontracts.
Yep.
And that's not currently how this one's structured.
Got it.
It's set up to basically just get one number from a general contractor.
Got it.
Other questions?
I imagine you're going to have more.
Yeah, we probably
for,
will.
local conversations and.
But really appreciate the
Yeah.
time and effort that you put in.
Thank you.
For this proposal for us, or this presentation for us. And I know we went with the facilities committee, and you went over some things with us there too, so that's kind of where the bathrooms, we're like, if we're gonna do it, we should do it. I
Absolutely.
mean, rather than waiting, so.
Absolutely.
That was kind of, that's okay. Here.
Yeah, so I would say that 1120 up there is very much a placeholder at this time. Our goal would be to push that as early as possible, but it's honestly going to be very it's a conversation that the general contractor will
Yeah.
have to be part of to sort of establish that. I think we just kind of this just got put in as a placeholder, and we can sort of adjust that back to where it was. The intent is to push for that to hopefully be done by end of first quarter. But again, there's lots of variables, and I think the contractor will definitely have to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, because I think for teachers, that's really important in terms of their planning, because if you're looking at the curriculum for the fall semester, you want to know when you're going to be able to get into that lab. So I understand where that question is coming from. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's really a critical element for curriculum planning.
Absolutely.
This might be a question more for Summer and Phil. Just as far as the conversations of the plan when we get there, is that something we're having later? Have we started to brainstorm where those teachers and those classes go in that time period?
We haven't done a lot with it. We've thought through some areas, for example, our CTE building and different things, but the main conversations have just been on whether the displacement made more sense in the spring or the fall. And so with the idea that it would be the fall, we have not gone there
Okay.
at all.
That makes sense. Oh, definitely not an us decision, but just in that we
Just
can
wondering on the
support and make
timeline.
sure that you guys
Yes.
have what you need and that we've taken that into account. But definitely fall makes more sense than spring, and it's not our decision, but as far as how we can support you guys in
absolutely.
those conversations.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your coming tonight. Really appreciate that
Nice to meet you
presentation.
guys.
Much too. Yep.
All right, thank you. We like school. You're dismissed. Okay, the next item then was an additional item that was added to the agenda was a request for a special meeting. And so we need a motion and a second.
I'd like to make a motion to add a special meeting to just discuss our collaboration based on our land assets and that relationship with the city.
Is there a second? Okay, any discussion regarding the motion? And I don't know, Laura, how you can add that in, or if we'll have to take a roll call vote. Probably take a roll call vote, okay.
A date that you're looking at again,
Well, we have to have the motion passed
November
first,
4,
Wes.
before November,
3rd is when the meeting with the city. City's having a forum on the 3rd.
yeah, on the election process, right? There's a city forum.
No.
On another issue.
We got it
Yeah,
emailed from
because there's a city,
Summer.
there's a date out there too for the change in the election process that we need to keep mindful
Oh,
of.
yeah.
Oh, but back to the request. I was just looking at materials and, the mind is a wonderful thing when you think of back and remember stuff. And we still have obligations to the city relative to the Hillcrest School. That's out there. I think we need to bring closure on that. It takes some work. I think it's not a lot of work, but it's gonna take some action by this board. And so that would be probably, I'd put that at one of the foremost things that we need to resolve. One thing off in terms of our historical issue relative to our working with the city, and that goes back to Hillcrest, where we have infringed upon the city land. It's a bad word, but we did, and we need to resolve the issue there.
Our
and it's a
understanding of
monetary
that.
commitment. So-
Our understanding of that. I don't know if
Any further
Dr. Schultz
discussion?
has anything, or others, board members have anything?
I currently don't feel comfortable adding an extra meeting in the meeting with the city. For me, the most important next step is having these conversations with the public. Those conversations, I think, are definitely needed, the ones you're talking about. But in that meeting, the thing that was most clear to me, and because we came to an agreement, I felt at the end of that meeting and want to keep working in good faith. But I think that bringing in the public opinion is the next step, and then we can have those conversations. So for me, the public conversations need to happen first, and then we can step back and have these conversations. The timeline discussed before makes just a little bit more sense to me.
My concern comes from that we haven't had time as a whole board to discuss city relationships in regards to land. They've been smaller conversations, and so I'm looking for time for us to openly discuss as a full board. Haven't been able to pick everybody's brain at this table and have some of those discussions. So, and also hearing from our superintendent on some of those discussions, as information continues to be presented to us, I think is important for us to hear from our superintendent.
Well, I don't make decisions, you do. However, I think there are a couple ways you could go. I think it depends on if we're going to talk about land. We've had land conversations. We have different relationships and different agreements with the city. Some are old, some are we're 2.5 years into an agreement with the Hillcrest land that does need to be rectified within a 5-year period. That is one that we do need to make sure we keep at the front. And then there's been proposals for additional land to be acquired or possibly traded. And so some of those conversations, it's a matter of when do we want to have those, I think, and how do we make sure that as a board, you are all comfortable that we have discussed everything as it relates to the district component of it. And if there are going to be community meetings, I do think it's important that we know all of the information being shared at those meetings. I think that could be an important piece of it. Now, whether you as a board want to move forward with a special meeting, or you want me to continue to work to try to get that information, that really is up to you. But I do think that piece of what information is being shared, because when we're begin talking about land and values, not everyone sees them the same. And so I think I understand very much where Kelly is coming from, in the sense that unfortunately we do have different pockets of conversations, trying to make sense of if we are working with the city on some different land acquisitions, when are those decisions going to be made? And does the chicken before the egg, when the city is talking with their constituents before or after us?
And that's
Or
where
you get
I'm,
paid the big
yeah, that's a
bucks to make
dilemma
the
for me,
decision.
because there will be no decisions made at this public forum. It's just an opportunity for people to hear and express their opinions. And then plans may change, depending on what kind of feedback they get from members of the community. So I would rather wait and have our conclusions from a board or discussion from the board after those meetings, but that's just my opinion.
I don't think we're talking anything inconsistent because the board meets on the 10th.
Right.
And, well,
I think
found
Kelly's
this-
requesting a
found-
meeting
I-
before the 3rd, correct?
I found this meeting tonight very helpful because we just focused on this. We didn't
Yes.
have a
Right.
lot of issues
I agree
coming
with
up,
that.
and-
One
and
issue, one
sometimes
topic
just to
meeting.
focus on one thing. I know our time is, we're using time, whatever else, but I too would like to see us, even if we just looked at what's going on at Hillcrest and we spend 40 minutes looking at that because there's some federal money involved that we need to rectify. And I'm as guilty as anybody that we've sat here and we've let the clock run on some of this. And so I would like to see us get a special session, 1 hour, talk, whether it's, I look at the clock, and we want to we know where we're at by the 11th or whenever that meeting is, 10th of November. We need to have it before that, and.
I just
week
view
of
myself
November
as,
3 it looks
yeah.
good to me in my calendar, as does the week of the 27th, so.
I just view myself as, and I've shared with this board before, representative of our school district and our school district assets. I think we all think that. And I just want to make sure that our discussions are for the school district and the school board, and we're able to have those openly. And I think we are, just, that's where I'm at.
I do think it's nice to have a meeting where we're focused on one
I-
topic, but I'm not sure that needs to be held prior to November 3rd. That's where I'm at.
And that's fine. I just, they get to give the message then. So if we're all okay with that, then that's what we are, and I'm not, but so we can vote. I don't care, whatever we want to do.
If we want to set the special session for after, quite honestly, I would just like to wait, and we're meeting on the 10th anyway, which is just 1 week after the open forum. So if we hear.
There is information that we have as a board that has not been discussed with all of us, and we don't even know what numbers they're going to be presenting to the public. We haven't agreed upon the information that's going to be presented.
Well, that is something that I think we could have representatives from the board meet with the city, 2 people rather than an entire board, meet with the city and find out what's going to happen at the presentation.
Why are we continuing to not have conversations as a full board about assets that we have in our school district?
As I said, I'm not opposed to that, but just I don't know the timing wise. I prefer it would be after the public has been informed.
After the city informs the public.
You're a part of the public.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
I don't know, I think that if we look at our calendar, I do think, and I have sent a couple correspondence that I do really feel that as we are engaging in some proposals that are being conducted right now, I think there's a difficulty as there's some proposals being presented to the school district, and you're trying to be respectful in when is it time to talk about that, when it's not us making the proposal. But the reality is that proposal has been going to be shared in our buildings to the community. And I do feel it's necessary for us to know what is being shared in those proposals, especially if they're in our buildings. And so whether we have a committee meet and be confident in that, or you send me, or you have, or have the full board, I think that would be okay. I really do. I mean,
And I'm not
if we
opposed to
have
that.
board members who aren't comfortable quite yet with a community conversation about it, if it does affect us, I do think we need to take note of that also.
Okay, so where we're at, I'm not really sure, but the motion was to have a special meeting. I don't think you set a date, did you, Kelly? No.
No, I didn't know what people's availability was. Again,
I think in regard to
Does-
what Summer is saying prior, we do need to know what is presented. And I would say having Dr. Schultz and maybe the facilities committee or the finance committee, one of those two, or one representative from each. We get one representative from the finance committee, one representative from the facilities committee,
And-
meet with the city prior to November 3rd.
and the reason we're not discussing it as a group, and I understand that from board members.
I just want, yeah, I gave my opinion already, so I'll let,
I just don't understand why we wouldn't discuss as a group when someone is making a presentation to us in our building, why we would not talk about that as a full group beforehand. I just am asking why. It's just, I'm just trying to understand, because maybe I'm missing something.
Kelly, I think you and I probably see that similar, which is why originally we were going to discuss it last month. You know, so that is, it's a hard situation.
Doesn't feel hard to me why we wouldn't discuss a proposal being given to us as a full board. That's my responsibility as a board member.
I guess I'm thinking, at this point in time, is it a proposal?
Yes, it's a proposal. We've gotten numerous emails, numerous proposals
But
from
it
that.
hasn't, no, we were told at the meeting when I met with the city that they would do nothing. Nothing until they had those public forums.
The meeting that Terry and I were in on doesn't, I hear your concerns, but none of those things, and it
That's
was
how
going
I
to be
felt.
exactly what was presented to us,
Us.
and we discussed the timeline at length for why it worked
That's
for
not, definitely
for
not
both
how I
groups.
view any of it. I don't think Dr. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
So that's where we're at.
So we can vote. I'd like,
Well, without a date on it,
well, I mean, we can't just say a date. I'll say a date, then I'll change my proposal.
but,
Before, yeah, a date before November
okay,
3rd.
all
Yeah.
right, okay. Okay, then I think we're ready for the question, Laura.
Juba.
No?
Hooks.
Aye.
Johnson. Debates.
No.
Cheddar. Motion does not carry.
Okay, motion fails. We'll now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
I guess I can just adjourn the meeting.
Yep.
Meeting is adjourned.